The sky was painted in soft pink and gold as the sun dipped behind the hills. The wind carried the faint cry of a baby and the sound of hooves crunching over dry dirt. Near the edge of the small, dusty town of Cedar Hollow, a woman knelt by a weathered wagon. Her hands trembled as she clutched a bundle of cloth close to her chest. Her name was Martha Evans, a widow barely 30, though the years had carved deep worry lines on her young face. Her husband, Tom, had been gone for nearly a year now. He died working the rail line, leaving her and their baby boy with nothing but debts in a rundown cabin. Since then, she'd done everything she could to keep them alive, washing clothes for ranch hands, mending boots, cooking for anyone who'd pay a dime. But it hadn't been enough. The money ran out and the landlord had come knocking. Now, two men stood before her, a tall man in a black vest and a sheriff's badge glinting on his chest, and beside him, a woman from the local orphanage. The woman's face was hard as stone, her lips pressed tight. "Martha Evans," she said sharply, "you can't care for that child. You have no roof, no income, and no means to feed him." "The law is clear." Martha's knees gave way, and she fell onto the dirt. "Please, please don't take my child away," she begged, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "He's all I've got left." The sheriff looked uneasy, glancing away. The woman from the orphanage didn't waver. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Evans. The boy deserves a chance at a better life. You can't provide that." She reached out her hands. Martha backed away, clutching her baby tighter. "No, I'll find work, I'll do anything." "Please, don't." The baby stirred and began to cry, a thin, desperate sound that seemed to pierce the evening stillness. From across the street, a man stood silently by the hitching post. He'd been there for some time, leaning against his horse, watching the scene unfold. His name was Caleb Walker, a rancher who rarely spoke more than a few words to anyone. People in town called him the Silent Rancher. Caleb had come to town for supplies, but his attention had been drawn to the commotion outside the sheriff's office. He saw the woman's trembling hands, the way she shielded her baby like a mother fox guarding her only cub. Something about her face, the pure, raw fear, struck a memory deep inside him. Years ago, he'd buried his wife and newborn daughter after a fever swept through his ranch. Since then, he'd built walls around himself taller than any fence. He kept to his cattle, his horses, and his silence. But now, looking at Martha, something in his chest stirred again, a feeling he thought had died long ago. The orphanage woman was losing patience. "Sheriff, take the child," she said sharply. The sheriff hesitated. "Maybe we can give her one more week, Miss Claire." "1 week won't change anything," the woman snapped. "She's starving. That child will be too." Martha was sobbing openly now, clutching the baby as if her heart might stop if she let go. The sheriff took a step forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "Martha," he said softly, "I'm sorry." Before he could say another word, Caleb stepped off the porch and crossed the street. The spurs on his boots jingled faintly with each step. Everyone turned to look at him. He stopped beside Martha, his shadow falling over her. "Hold on," he said, his voice low but steady. Miss Claire frowned. "This is none of your concern, Mr. Walker." "It is now," Caleb replied, his eyes never leaving Martha and the baby. The sheriff looked surprised. "You know this woman, Caleb?" Caleb shook his head. "No, but I know what it's like to lose family." He paused, then added quietly, "Let the woman keep her child. I'll vouch for her." Miss Claire crossed her arms. "Vouch for her? What does that mean?" "It means she can work for me," Caleb said simply. "On my ranch. I'll see that she and the boy are fed and have a roof." Martha blinked in shock. She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. Why would you do that for me?" Caleb met her gaze. "Because nobody should lose a child just because they're poor." The sheriff looked between them, then sighed. "If Mr. Walker's willing to take responsibility, that's good enough for me." Miss Claire frowned, clearly unhappy, but she knew better than to argue with a man like Caleb. "Very well," she said stiffly. "But the orphanage will be checking in." She turned and walked off, her skirt swirling in the dust. Martha still sat frozen, clutching her baby. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Caleb replied. "Come on, it's a long ride to the ranch." That night, under a sky full of stars, they rode together, Martha holding her baby close, Caleb riding quietly beside her. The air smelled of sage and earth. She hadn't ridden a horse in years, and every step made her feel like she was moving further away from her pain and closer to something new. The Walker Ranch stretched wide across the valley, surrounded by rolling hills and grazing cattle. The main house stood tall but lonely, its white paint faded and porch creaking in the wind. Caleb led her inside, showing her a small but clean room. "You can stay here," he said. "There's work in the kitchen and garden if you're up to it. The cook's name is Mary, she'll help you get settled." Martha nodded, tears filling her eyes again. "Thank you, Mr. Walker." He looked at her for a long moment. "Just Caleb," he said, then tipped his hat and walked away. Days turned into weeks. Martha worked hard, and the ranch slowly came alive again. Her laughter began to echo through the yard, and the baby's giggles filled the air. Caleb watched from a distance at first, pretending not to care, but he found himself looking for them more often, by the well, in the garden, by the corral where Martha sometimes sang softly to the baby while hanging laundry. One evening, a storm rolled in, lightning cracked the sky, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. Caleb was in the barn, securing the horses, when he heard Martha scream. He ran out to find her standing outside the cabin, clutching her baby, staring in horror as water rushed down the hill toward them. "The creek's overflowing," she shouted. "It's coming straight for the house." Without hesitation, Caleb grabbed her arm. "Come on." He pulled her toward higher ground, the rain soaking them both. The baby was crying, the wind howling like a wild beast. The floodwater roared closer, sweeping over the path. Martha slipped, nearly falling, but Caleb caught her. He lifted her and the baby both into his arms, fighting against the current until they reached a rocky ridge above the ranch. They huddled there under a tree, drenched and shaking. When the storm finally eased, the ranch below was a mess, fences broken, barns half flooded. But they were alive. Martha turned to Caleb, tears mixing with rain on her face. "You saved us," she whispered. He shook his head. "You're the one who fought to keep going. I just helped." In that quiet moment, something passed between them, a shared understanding, unspoken but deep. From then on, things changed. They talked more. Caleb smiled again, the hard lines around his eyes softening. And Martha, who once feared she'd lose everything, found herself laughing, dreaming, and believing again. Months later, on a warm spring morning, the town gathered for the annual fair. Martha stood at a small stand selling pies she'd baked herself, her baby, now a chubby, happy boy, sitting beside her. Caleb stood nearby, leaning on the fence, watching her with quiet pride. The sheriff passed by, tipping his hat. "You did good, Caleb. That woman's got her life back thanks to you." Caleb looked at Martha and smiled faintly. "Nah," he said, "she did that herself." As the sun set and the fair lights flickered on, Martha walked over, baby in her arms. She looked up at him shyly. "I never thanked you properly." He smiled softly. "You already did, every day." The baby reached out and grabbed Caleb's finger, giggling. Caleb's heart swelled in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Maybe," Martha said after a pause, "you could stay for supper tonight. Just the three of us." Caleb nodded slowly, his eyes warm. "I'd like that," and for the first time in a long, long while, he didn't feel like the silent rancher anymore. He felt like a man who'd found something worth living for again, a family, born not of blood but of kindness and second chances. As the stars came out over Cedar Hollow, Martha whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. The words were simple but full of meaning. "Please, don't take my child away," she had once begged. Now, she looked at Caleb holding her son and knew no one ever would again.